Let me ruin something for you. Right now, at this exact moment, you think you're hearing the world. Maybe there's background noise. Maybe it's quiet. Either way, you're confident about one thing. If there's a sound, you hear it. Simple. Obvious. Done. Wrong. You've never heard a sound in your life. Not once. What you've been experiencing, every song, every voice, every thunderclap that made your chest tighten, none of it came from out there. It was built in here, inside your skull, in the dark, by a 3-pound machine that's been quietly lying to you since the day you were born. And the wild part? The lie is so good, so seamless, so fast, you never suspected a thing. I want to show you exactly how the trick works, step by step, because once you see it, really see it, the world gets stranger and more beautiful at the same time. And that tension, that feeling of something being both unsettling and gorgeous, that's where all the best physics lives. So let's start with what's actually happening in the air around you right now. Picture a room, any room. The air in that room is full of molecules, nitrogen, oxygen, a little carbon dioxide, all moving around randomly, bouncing off each other, off the walls, off you. Just chaos. Constant, boring, invisible chaos. Now somebody claps their hands, their palms push together and shove the air molecules in front of them. Those molecules get squeezed together, compressed into a tiny zone of higher pressure, but they don't stay there. They push back. They push their neighbors, those neighbors push their neighbors. And suddenly, that little zone of compression is moving, rippling outward through the room like a wave. Here's what most people get wrong. They imagine sound like wind, like the air itself is rushing toward you. It's not. The individual molecules barely move at all. They just nudge the ones next to them. What travels is the pattern. The disturbance, the compression itself moving through space. Think about a crowd at a stadium doing a Mexican wave. Nobody runs across the stadium. Everybody just stands up and sits down at the right moment, and the wave travels. Same idea exactly. The molecules are the crowd. The compression is the wave, and that wave moves fast. At room temperature, about 343 meters per second. That's fast to us, but it's about 1,000,000 times slower than light, which seems like a random fact right now. Hold on to it. It matters. The wave is real, completely, measurably, physically real. You can put a microphone in the air and graph it. You get a beautiful oscillating curve, pressure going up, then down, then up. Frequency and amplitude encoded right there in the shape of the wave. That wave exists whether you're in the room or not. Whether any living thing is in the room or not, it doesn't need you. That's the physical object. That's the thing we send. Now, what happens when it hits you? It hits your eardrum first. Your eardrum is just a thin piece of skin, stretched across a narrow canal. And when the pressure wave arrives, this compression in the air, that membrane moves. It vibrates in and out, matching the frequency of the wave almost perfectly. Right there. First translation. Air pressure variation becomes mechanical motion. Behind that membrane are 3 of the smallest bones in your entire body. They have names, the malleus, the incus, and the stapes, but names aren't the point. The point is what they do. They form a tiny lever system, a mechanical amplifier, passing the vibration from the eardrum deeper inward and increasing its force as they do it. Second translation. Motion becomes amplified motion. Then that amplified motion hits a membrane on a structure called the cochlea, which is a spiral-shaped, fluid-filled tube coiled up like a snail shell tucked inside your skull. And now the vibration transfers from air mechanics into fluid mechanics. The wave that started as compressed air is now a ripple in liquid. Third translation. Mechanical vibration becomes fluid wave. And inside that fluid-filled spiral, lining the entire inner surface, are roughly 15,000 hair cells. Tiny, impossibly tiny. Each one tuned to a slightly different frequency, laid out from one end of the coil to the other, like the keys of a piano. When the fluid wave passes through, different hair cells respond to different frequencies. The ones tuned to high frequencies bend near the entrance. The ones tuned to low frequencies bend near the far end. When a hair cell bends, it fires. It sends an electrical pulse up a nerve fiber. Fourth translation, fluid wave becomes electrical signal. So let's count where we are. You started with a pressure wave in air. That became mechanical vibration in 3 bones. That became a fluid wave in a spiral tube. That became bending in 15,000 tiny hairs. That became electrical pulses racing up 30,000 nerve fibers toward your brain. 4 complete translations, 4 different physical media, and we haven't gotten to the brain yet. Here's the question I want you to sit with. At which step in that chain does sound actually exist? The wave in the air, is that sound? The mechanical vibration in the bones, is that sound? The electrical pulse heading to the brain, is that sound? Point to it. Find it. Tell me exactly where. You can't. Not yet. Keep going. The electrical signals arrive at the auditory cortex, a region toward the back and sides of your brain, and here's where things stop being physics and start being something we genuinely don't have a full answer for. What arrives at the cortex is not sound. It's a pattern of electrical spikes, frequency information, timing information, intensity information, all encoded in the rate and rhythm of firing neurons. It's a code. A very sophisticated, very dense code, but still a code. And your brain reads it, compares it to stored patterns from every sound you've heard before, cross-references it with context. Where are you? What were you expecting? What just happened a moment ago? Runs it through emotional memory, checks it for threat or familiarity. And then, out of all that dark computational work, emerges an experience, a voice, a chord, rain on a window, your mother calling your name. Notice what just happened. The brain didn't receive the sound and play it back like a speaker. It constructed the sound, assembled it from raw signal data and prior experience, and presented the finished product to your consciousness as though it had always been there, as though it came straight from the world with no editing at all. Your brain is not a recorder. It's a storyteller, a very fast, very confident, largely unconscious storyteller. And here's where I have to be honest with you, the way you deserve to be talked to honestly, because we know all of the above. We've traced every wire. We've mapped the cochlea. We've watched the auditory cortex light up in brain scanners. We understand the pathway in beautiful, precise detail. But the moment where the electrical pattern becomes the experience of a violin, that moment, we do not understand. Neuroscientists have a word for it. They call it qualia, the what it's like part of an experience. The redness of red, the loudness of loud. Not the signal, not the nerve firing, not the cortex activating, but the felt quality of the thing. We can name it. We named it qualia. But naming something is not the same as explaining it. That's a trap that gets a lot of smart people. You give something a technical sounding name, and it starts to feel like you've solved something. You haven't. You've just filed it under a different label. The honest position is this. We don't know how or why physical processes in the brain produce subjective experience. We don't know why there is something it's like to hear a sound rather than just information being processed silently in the dark. That's not a gap we're about to fill next year. It's one of the deepest open questions in all of science. And it gets stranger when you consider this. A bat's cochlea works on the same basic principle as yours, but it responds to frequencies between 20,000 and 100,000 hertz, way beyond what you can detect. A dog hears a range you'll never access. A dolphin navigates by sound waves bouncing off objects in water, building three-dimensional pictures of the world from echoes. Same basic mechanism, different frequency windows, different constructed realities. Who's hearing the world correctly? All of them? None of them? The question assumes there's a correct version to hear, and that assumption might be the problem. Okay, now I want to go back to something. You've probably heard the question 1,000 times. If a tree falls in a forest and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound? And you've probably heard it answered 1,000 times too. Half the people say yes, obviously, the other half smirk and say no. Then everyone moves on, mildly pleased with themselves, and nothing interesting happens. I think both sides are missing the point entirely. And now that you've sat through what we've just walked through, you can see why. There are two completely separate questions hiding inside that one sentence. First question, does the falling tree create a pressure wave in the air? Yes, absolutely, without any doubt. The tree hits the ground pushes air, air compresses, a wave propagates outward. That happens whether you're there or not, whether any living thing is within 100 miles. The wave is a physical event in the world, and it doesn't require an audience. Second question, does that pressure wave become sound? And here is where you have to be careful, because it depends on what you mean by sound. If sound means the pressure wave, yes, it's there. If sound means the experience of hearing, the constructed, felt, subjective thing that emerges from cochlea and cortex and consciousness, then no. Without a nervous system, there is no experience. The wave propagates. It bumps into trees. It fades. Nobody hears anything because there's no one to do the hearing. These aren't contradictory answers. They're answers to different questions. The confusion, the centuries of confusion, came from using one word to mean two entirely different things: sound as physical event versus sound as perceptual experience. Physicists and philosophers were arguing past each other the whole time because they hadn't agreed on the terms. That's not a small thing. The history of human confusion is largely a history of people arguing about different things while using the same word. And once you see this particular trick, you start seeing it everywhere. Color. Is red a property of that apple? No. The apple's surface absorbs most wavelengths of visible light and reflects those around 700 nanometers. That's a physical fact about the surface. The redness, the warm, vivid, immediately recognizable quality of red, that's your visual cortex responding to that wavelength and constructing an experience. Take away the brain and the apple has no color. It just has a surface that reflects certain wavelengths. Smell, taste, temperature, pain. Every single thing you've ever experienced, every quality, every texture, every sensation is your nervous system's interpretation of physical events, not a direct download of the world itself. The world you live in is a model, a rendering, a very high fidelity, constantly updated, deeply convincing simulation that your brain generates from incomplete sensory data, second by second, your entire life. And you've been walking around inside that rendering thinking it was reality itself. Here's the part I keep coming back to. Think about what's actually happening around you right now. The physical world, not the model. There are pressure waves passing through the air, sound waves at every frequency. There are electromagnetic waves at every wavelength. Visible light, yes, but also infrared, ultraviolet, radio waves, microwaves. There are gravitational fluctuations from distant masses. There are neutrinos passing through your body by the billions every second, barely interacting with anything. You are sitting in the middle of an unbelievable storm of physics, and you're perceiving almost none of it. Your sensory systems are not designed to show you everything. They're designed to show you the slice of physical reality that was useful for survival on the African savanna a few 100,000 years ago. That's it. That's the filter, not truth. Survival. So the colors you see, the sounds you hear, the smells you detect, these are the outputs of a system optimized for keeping you alive long enough to reproduce, not for giving you an accurate picture of what's actually out there. Which means that even the model, even the rendering, is a simplified, edited, survival-focused version of the physical world. Reality underneath is almost incomprehensibly richer than anything we can perceive directly. And yet, and here is the part I find genuinely beautiful, we figured it out anyway. We couldn't hear the ultrasound, so we built instruments that could. We couldn't see radio waves, so we built receivers. We couldn't feel gravitational waves from colliding black holes a billion light years away, so we built LIGO, a machine so sensitive it detects distortions in space smaller than a proton, and we heard them anyway. The brain that builds a limited model of reality also builds tools that reach past that model. That's remarkable. That's not supposed to work as well as it does. I want to slow down on one more thing because I think it's easy to hear all of this and feel slightly deflated, like I'm telling you the music was never really there. Like I'm telling you the experience of hearing your favorite song is somehow less real because I've explained the mechanism. I want to push back on that. Hard. The pressure wave doesn't care about you. That's true. It propagates indifferently, bouncing off walls, losing energy, fading into nothing. It carries information in the way that any physical event does, passively, without purpose. But what your brain does with that information is not passive at all. In about 10 milliseconds, your auditory system takes a raw stream of pressure changes and transforms it into something that can make you cry. Something that can trigger a memory from 15 years ago with no warning. Something that can walk you into a room and immediately make you feel like you're 8 years old again in your grandmother's kitchen. That full emotional depth, that temporal richness, assembled in the blink of an eye from nothing but air moving. That's not a limitation. That's extraordinary. The fact that it's constructed doesn't make it less real. It makes it more interesting. The brain is not just processing sound, it's creating meaning. And meaning doesn't live in the pressure wave. It lives in the relationship between the wave and the mind that receives it. Music doesn't exist in the air. It exists in the encounter between physics and consciousness. And that means, in some important sense, music is a collaboration between the source and you. Every time you hear something, every single time, your brain is doing something no physics equation fully captures yet. It is taking dead matter in motion and turning it into experience. That transformation is the most ordinary thing in the world and the least understood. So here's where we've landed, and I want you to feel the full weight of this, not just tick it off as a list of facts. There is a physical world out there. It has pressure waves and electromagnetic fields and temperature gradients and all kinds of real, measurable, objective things happening all the time. That world is not created by your perception. It's there whether you're looking or not. The tree falls. The wave propagates. That's real. And there is an experienced world in here, the one you actually live in, the only one you've ever directly encountered. Rich, immediate, textured, emotional. That world is constructed by your nervous system from incomplete data, filtered for survival relevance, shaped by memory and expectation and context. It's a model, a brilliant model, but a model. And then there is the gap between those two things, the translation zone, where physical events become electrical signals and electrical signals become experience. That gap is where the deepest questions live. That's where the hard problem of consciousness sits, unsolved, staring back at us. We know the pathway. We've done extraordinary work tracing every step. But we don't know why any of it feels like anything. We don't know why there's a subject in here having experiences rather than just a biological machine processing inputs in the dark. That question is open. Genuinely, stubbornly, beautifully open. And I think you should find that exciting rather than unsettling. Because a closed question is a dead end. An open question is an invitation. You've been hearing your whole life. Every morning, the alarm, the birds, the traffic, someone making coffee. Every conversation you've ever had. Every piece of music that changed something in you. Every voice you've loved and every voice you've lost. You experienced all of it as direct, immediate, obvious, just there. None of it came from out there. All of it was built in here. That thin membrane in your ear, picking up pressure fluctuations too small to see. 3 tiny bones passing it inward. 15,000 hair cells firing in precise sequence. 30,000 nerve fibers carrying the code. A cortex decoding, comparing, constructing, delivering. 10 milliseconds every time, without being asked. And you called it hearing. We've traced every wire. We understand the beautiful, intricate, improbable chain of translations that makes it possible. And at the end of all that tracing, at the very last step, where the electrical pattern becomes the experience, we hit a wall. Not from lack of effort, not from lack of intelligence. The wall is real and it's still there. Why does it feel like something? We don't know. And if you think that admission is a failure, you've misunderstood what science is. Science is the discipline of being honest about what you know and what you don't, and not pretending the gap is smaller than it is. Giving something a name, qualia, consciousness, neural correlates, and then walking away satisfied is not understanding. It's just better organized ignorance. The honest position is wonder. You have never heard a sound. What you've heard, every note, every word, every laugh, is you. Your brain doing something spectacular with the raw material the world sends you, taking pressure and air and assembling meaning from it. Maybe that's not a limitation. Maybe that's the most interesting thing about being alive.